Hi, Team 2. I'm sitting here with Timothy Vernon. He has just read your proposal about, with your question around changing conventional opera art form using technology. And he has a few comments that he will give you as feedback. Now, he's going to stay off camera, but you will be able to hear all his feedback, and he's looking at your presentation.
Team 2, congratulations on all your hard work. There's a lot of background that you've dug and delved into, and I appreciate it very much. I also like the idea that you're taking seriously the technological issues of the day. How do we fold these things in that have become ubiquitous, things that everybody knows and uses, and how do we make them in some way contributive to the experience of something as arcane as an opera performance? Now, to start with, most of you who have been to an opera performance or a classical music concert, a symphony concert, or a chamber music concert, you know that somebody will invariably come out and tell you to turn off all your handheld devices, turn off your phones, and turn off your thises and thatses. And that basically stems from the concern that the true experience of these arts involves absolute concentration, or the capacity to absolutely to concentrate. People experience things differently, but at the very deepest level, these great works of art that we come back to again and again have such depth and complexity and some kind of truth about human nature in them that they require real study. Really listening to classical music is hard work. There's so much going on. You can listen to it a whole different ways. You can just have it as background at dinner. And unfortunately for me, if people are on their cell phones during a performance, I'm going to feel like a bit of background at dinner, because nobody can split the focus and have that soul-filling experience. And the totality of your absorption in a performance and all the effort that's being put out in the moment. This is not a recorded thing that you can push buttons and so on. These are real people really performing, really acting out the stories of their characters and really singing to you. And they deserve your undivided attention. That's one thing. How do we use the handheld device? How is it appropriate? Well, I could see all kinds of stuff happening. So, for example, you come into the theater and right up to the curtain, you've got a feed that will give you information that will help you supplement what's in the program in terms of the storytelling and the synopsis of the story, that will point out certain things to watch for, that will give you background information. And I could see that same feed coming on right at the interval, so that you have the option during the interval of listening or watching and having a summary of what went on, how that's going to connect to what's coming up in the next act, and all of that. And I think further educational aspect of these devices to make stuff available, even in short, drive length snippets. So I listen to lectures in my car all the time. I have a commute from my home into rehearsal. It's about half an hour. And I have a series of lectures I listen to that are half an hour. And I can hear a lecture going in and a lecture coming home. And I love them. And they're wonderful and very helpful. So I could see something like this applied to handheld devices, which the opera could get into. And of course, it also goes to the larger frame of how do we best use internet connection and the kind of connectivity that all that brings to further reach the audience and to enhance their experience. But I think I have to tell you that I know from my own experience that the actual use of such a device and the focus of such a device in a performance does nothing but deflect your own experience. You lessen your own experience of what's really going on. And also you distract your neighbors. Now, the use of technology in performance is interesting. I just went to a production of Hamlet at Bard on the Beach in Vancouver just a couple of days ago. And most of the characters have handheld devices. It's set in a modern time, absolutely contemporary time. And those of you that know Hamlet know that there's a famous play within a play. And this was so brilliantly set up by the director, using tablets, handhelds, and magnifications of screens, and little tiny models and live actors all in one framework. It was just riveting, and it was completely modern. The very first thing that happened in that production is Ophelia comes to the sleeping Hamlet, gives him a kiss, leans over his body, and then clicks open her iPhone. And of course the whole audience went nuts, because there were a lot of young people there most of them with their handheld devices, they've just been told to turn off. So anyway, I hope some of this is, although I sound a bit harsh about iPhone in performance or handheld in performance, I think there are lots of options that you've suggested in your other work, and I will certainly take them seriously.
Thank you.
Hi, team. So you just got some feedback from Timothy Vernon, and as you could see, he is interested in the idea of the educative potential of handheld devices, but he is very reluctant to bring them inside the Opera House. So I'd like to offer a few of my own perspectives on your idea and then talk about your process. So in terms of your idea, I would encourage you to take Timothy's feedback very seriously, but on the other hand, I would also encourage you to take a critical perspective. So clearly there is no one who is a live performer who would welcome handheld devices into their performance hall. And as someone who teaches, I can relate to that. Teachers, we have the same conversation, right? Teachers have the same conversation when we say, well, we don't want people on Facebook or using iPhones in our class. And Timothy expressed that he would feel disrespected if he were up there and people were on their iPhones. That said, I don't think you should necessarily drop your idea. And I'm going to put forward my personal view is. What my personal view is. My personal view is that there is a kernel of brilliance in this idea. That if you think about the video we watched of Stephen Long sitting there with his family, I wonder if he had a handheld device that somehow was helping him understand what was going on as it was happening, if he would appreciate it. So I think that you need to be very, very careful in the development of this idea, that you're somehow not disrespecting the performers. That said, I wouldn't necessarily throw out this idea because Timothy showed resistance to it. You might. You might go back and start with another idea, or you might take his advice and think about other ways to use electronics. But I wouldn't say you necessarily need to. Now, in terms of process, the number one thing about your process is that it was incredible. You went through a very thorough process. When I look through all your process documents, I'm really impressed by your range of convergence, divergence, and convergence. So great work is the first thing. And I'll be very, very curious to read about it in your paper. The things I would point out are, I think that there is a misalignment between your problem statement and BHAG and your solution. When I look at your solution and what it offers, what you're saying is, you're saying that there be bios, narrative, performances in music, pop-up opera. Most of the value of what the handheld device brings seems to be educational. Your question seems to, your problem question, which is around changing the conventional opera art form through innovative presentations, seems to rest on the assumption that technology will be a draw, or innovative presentations. And you use two technological examples, one being having holograms and that kind of thing, and the other being the app. I don't think that problem is as compelling as the problem of how can we use technology to help educate people who feel alienated from opera. I think the educational question is more compelling, and I think that is the need that your recommendation responds to. So in other words, I would urge you, if you do in your final analysis, when you write your final paper, decide to stay in this direction, go back and revisit your BHAG and your problem statement and see if those are actually the most compelling problem and vision to solve. So an additional point on that same note is when in your problem statement you write, the that you want to reach a young demographic who may demand additional stimulation and or opera education and are used to using similar technologies. For me, quite frankly, additional stimulation is not a good reason to bring iPods into the theater. Now, you can argue with me in your paper, but that I would suggest that you need a criterion that says respect for opera, because clearly that was very important to our host. And so I would say that if people need additional stimulation, then perhaps they shouldn't be there, or perhaps then you're solving a different problem and opera should be shorter. But I think a good reason to bring them in might be education, but not additional stimulation. Okay? Let me know if that doesn't make sense. Let me just read my notes to make sure I'm getting everything. Okay, I already said your process is excellent. And let me just see. I think I have some comments on your criteria. Let me just get there. Oh, here it is. Okay, so now I'm at the end of your presentation. I thought what was a symptom of how strong your process was how well developed all three of your final solutions were, your final alternatives. So great work there. In terms of criteria, you want to get a one level more specific. So right now you have inspirational, educates, long-term sustainability, and transformative. So inspirational and transformative, you definitely would want to. You may know what this means, but I need to understand it, and I'd also question whether there is overlap between those two criteria. Also question whether short-term sustainability is important to you, short-term viability, whether they have, let's say, for example, the startup capital, or are you only looking at the long term? I noticed that you do have respect from opera in your Lino-It, because you wrote does not jeopardize core product. It was something that came up in your Lino-It sheets. Sorry, I'm just, I think I had one more thing to say, but I'm trying to remember this. Maybe that is all. Oh yeah, I find it interesting that you put educates as one of your criteria. So clearly this is very important to you. And I wonder if the educative capacity came out in your process later after you'd set your problem statement and BHAG, but perhaps you didn't go back and iterate back to put that in. So in short, I see the education as being key to your recommendation, and I see that as the core problem that you're solving, is how might we educate people. So, for example, if you sorry, I already said that. This is the second time I'm recording this video because it didn't turn out last time. Okay, in all, I wrote here your process was incredible. I think your solution, you know what? I personally think it's brilliant. When I opened this up, I was very excited about it. That said, I am not the client, so please take what I'm saying and what the client's saying very seriously. And I look forward to hearing what you come up with, and I look forward to reading about your process.